In the past, I've gone on record as wishing that the Lost Omens series for Pathfinder 2e would feature larger books with more focused content, and that the books would be less interdependent, that they would be more capable of standing on their own. Well, you know how they say, be careful what you wish for because you just might get it? Well, today we're going to talk about the Lost Omens Mwangi Expanse for Pathfinder 2nd Edition on this episode of The Local Disaster Tour Guide. Hello, travelers and tourists. My name is Mark, and I am the local disaster tour guide. That's right, I am a storyteller who would love the opportunity to intern for Old Mage Jatimbe. Seriously, would that not be the coolest? Welcome to a journey through the fantastic world of TTRPGs like Pathfinder and Starfinder. Today, I'm going to be doing a mini review for the Lost Omens Mwangi Expanse, the latest book in the Lost Omens line for the Golarion campaign setting in Pathfinder 2e. This book is massive, coming in at a little over 300 pages, with an MSRP of $49.99, and it deep dives the Mwangi Expanse region for the Golarion campaign setting, offering an incredibly detailed insight into the people and locations and adventure possibilities in this particular part of the Golarion campaign setting. Now, as with any review that I do on this channel, I do encourage you to remember an important grain of salt, which is, my opinion is just that, an opinion. The best review you will ever get is to check out a book for yourself. So I always encourage you, try to borrow the book from a friend, or maybe check it out at your fine local gaming store. Trying a product for yourself before making a purchase decision is always the best choice. Now, this review will be a mini review. It's going to be shorter than my standard reviews, mostly because I already did another review this week and I just didn't have the time to film 2 full reviews. But I can tell you that the Lost Omens Mwangi Expanse really impresses me. There's a lot of good stuff here, and I wanted to give you a quick synopsis of my thoughts about this book. So let's get started. As with any review, I'm going to start with my overall thoughts and then talk a little bit about the specifics. Overall, the Mwangi Expanse is a fantastic product. It met a lot of my expectations. I have been wishing for the Lost Omens series to be larger books with more focused content. That is definitely true. You've got 300 pages of deep dive content on the Mwangi Expanse, so I absolutely love that. And unlike some of the other books in the Lost Omens series, the Mwangi Expanse stands on its own really well. There are very few points in this book that you would need to reference another Lost Omens book in order to make use of it, so I really appreciate the fact that our first regional book for the Lost Omens series is such a fantastic standalone product. That's a good thing. Overall, this impressive book earns a grade of a C+ from me. Now, that may seem like a low grade, but remember, one of the elements of my reviews is the question, how much use will you actually get from a product? And the reality is, campaign setting books are the definition of C or D tier products, kind of situation dependent. If you're using the campaign setting, if you are in that particular region, the books are very useful. And if you're not in that region or using a similar region in a different setting, then the books aren't going to see much use. So this is definitely a campaign setting book, and it kind of has that restriction on its utility, but this is a very solid campaign setting book, and that's the reason I give it that C+ rating. This is a good example of what a campaign setting book could and should be, and I really enjoy it as a result. But that does lead to the most important thing that I think you need to know if you are considering this book, which is this is really a Game Master focused product. Players, unless you are just really interested in the lore of the Mwangi Expanse, this book is probably going to be a pass for you. There's just not much material that is geared towards players. So, the synopsis of my overall thoughts: this is a Game Master focused campaign setting book and an excellent example of what those books should be, but it is a weak purchase for players. Let's talk strengths and weaknesses to highlight why. So, the most obvious weakness of this book is one that you've probably seen in a few corners of the internet already, which is the relative lack of crunch in this book. And ultimately, a lack of crunch is something that makes a book less engaging and useful for players. Don't get me wrong, players love flavor just as much as game masters do, but when you're trying to focus a product towards players, you kind of want to make sure that there is some crunch inside of that product because you want whatever the product is to be relevant to their character sheet. Flavor is great, but if it's not on the character sheet, players tend to skip over it. And I think it is a fair assessment to say that this book is pretty light in the crunch department. In fact, by the most generous definition I could give to player character focused crunch, at best, this book is 15% crunch, and that really is stretching it. We could probably leave the point there, and that would be good enough for this video, but there is a nuance to this point that I kind of want to talk about because while there are mechanical rules in this book, while there are crunchy bits, I actually don't think a lot of this crunch is something players will use. There are several examples of crunch in this book that feel more like stealth Game Master crunch than actual player character options. I think the best example of this is one of the new ancestries, the Goloma. If you take the Goloma as written in this book, they sound a lot more like an interesting social skill challenge that the Game Master might drop on a party than they do something that a player might actually use for one of their characters. The as-written description of this ancestry kind of puts them in a situation where they're not as useful as a player character. And don't get me wrong, I love the Goloma. My favorite piece of artwork in this book is one of the pieces of Goloma art. Seriously, they look amazing. But I feel that the way the crunch and flavor and mechanics are set up, that ultimately this is an ancestry that is more useful for Game Master NPCs than for actual player characters. And that's kind of a thread that hits many of the mechanical elements inside of this book. There are a lot of things that look like player character content, but when you actually think about how they would be used in an RPG, at least as written, a lot of it actually tilts more towards the Game Master side of the equation than towards the players. So it's not just this book doesn't have much crunch to begin with, but it's that it doesn't have much crunch, and the crunch that it does have often feels more useful to the GM than it does to the players in the game. So that's the most obvious weakness of this book. What's the most obvious strength? Well, in a word, flavor. Seriously, Paizo did a true and wonderful deep dive into the Mwangi Expanse, and this book has so much flavor, it comes with its own barbecue recipe. That's not even a joke. Page 195. Go check it out. Seriously, Paizo did such a fantastic job diving into the Mwangi Expanse region. I have been a huge fan of the Mwangi Expanse since Pathfinder 1E, and to have so much more lore and information and just setting goodies to dive into, that this book just struck a perfect chord for me when it comes to lore, flavor, all of that stuff. In fact, it's kind of hard for me to pick a favorite thing in this book just because of how much good stuff is actually here. In 1E, it probably would have been the city of Nantambu, but if I have to pick in this book, I think the new religion section that they have for the Mwangi Expanse is probably my favorite. It's a hard call, but I really love some of the interesting dives they did into faith and religion in this part of the Golarion setting. If you are a game master who has any interest in this particular region of the Golarion setting, this book is well done, and you are going to find plot hook after plot hook after plot hook after literally a deity walking through town and blasting people with nuclear spells plot hook. This book is cram-packed with information, and I don't have time to dive into everything that is in this book. I just have to say, this is the quantity and quality of information that I knew Paizo was able to produce for their campaign setting, and I'm glad to see them finally presenting so well as part of the Lost Omens line. Now, I know that this review has been pretty short, so let me just give a shout out to my friend Tommy over at Black Dragon Gaming. He has been doing some fantastic deep dives into the new lore and new setting information, so if you want to find out more about some of the content in this book, he is all aboard the Mwangi Expanse hype train, and he has some fantastic videos that can give you some more detailed information. I highly recommend checking him out, but overall, if you're a game master who is interested in this setting, interested in this location, this is definitely a product I think you should check out. But that is a quick synopsis of my thoughts about the Lost Omens Mwangi Expanse. Now it's time to turn the conversation over to you. Did you enjoy this shorter review format? Or do you prefer my more in-depth reviews? Let me know down in the comments, and if you have any specific questions about this book, feel free to ask those as well. Also, let me know what your reaction to this book was. Do you wish that there was more player character focused content? And do you agree with my assessment that some of the mechanical crunch in this book is stealth GM content rather than PC content? What do you think about that distinction? If you enjoyed this video, like it and share it. Subscribe to the channel for more conversations about TTRPGs. Thank you so much for being a part of the conversation, and have a wonderful day.